this was a demo of another song from this album. At this point it was called Team Tar. It's a very raw recording, just them in front of a microphone in the middle of the desert. You can actually hear the crickets in the background. Very spacey, almost like stoned out stuff, and you know, you don't really want to change it. You don't want to take that element out of it. But on the other hand, you know, when you're, I mean, Onda and I, we've traveled to the desert. We've been with them in their homeland. There, it really makes sense. But outside of that context, it maybe needs a little bit more production. But you have to be very, very careful. So what we ended up with was this. I thought, again, more in terms of this Eno-esque sort of textural thing. I added some strange sounds here at the beginning. Then I introduced a viola at one point, which is, of course, not a Tuareg instrument at all. This is from the album That's that great guitar amp. Yeah, so that was a recent production that I did, and you know, you guys are here at the school. Training is important. I would agree with that 100%. I think it's great that you're here doing this, but you know, there's also an element of everything that we do, no matter what training we have, is that self-taught. You have to still find your own place, and you have to experiment. Yeah, go ahead.
Just for a second.
Yeah.
You were talking about lo-fi recording over there. I was just wondering, why didn't you bring, I don't know, a laptop and a sound card or something, which is fairly simple?
Yeah, yeah. It's a good point. I mean, because basically what happened, especially with this, the first record we made that was pretty okay. The function was within, let's say, reason. The last one was a really big disappointment. I found out, actually, when I was in the Paris airport online, I had sent this guy an equipment query, like what's the shape of the equipment, like 3 weeks before. I was in the airport in Charles de Gaulle on my laptop, basically when I found out the state of the studio.
Oh, okay.
So it was actually really, now, I know I also felt like it was a little bit irresponsible on my part, that I should have brought more. But, you know, I had been there a couple times, it had functioned. I mean, we did end up borrowing stuff down there. There are people that have some equipment, you know. I mean, the engineer himself, actually, the stuff that we really used in the end, most of it came from the guy who was the engineer. He has his own home studio. But it's a very good point. If I ever went back, I would certainly do what you said. You know, I would come in a completely, you know, different situation. But, you know, back to these dualisms, you know, I think dualisms, these are safety zones. You know, wherever you fall on every side of it, these are the safe places. You know, I mean, I'm into lo-fi. I don't care what it sounds like. I mean, what does that mean? I'm only into hi-fi. I'm only into Steely Dan records. I mean, what the hell does that mean, you know? I don't think these things are very important. I think things get interesting, again, at the slash line, in between things. That's when new things start to happen. You know, we do need to avoid the rules. They are helpful at times, they're rules for a reason, but certainly they don't work all the time. You know, we need to learn the tools we think we need, and then we need to learn some that we don't think we need. You know, if we learn tools we don't think we need, then we might actually be doing something interesting, because we'd actually be trying something different, you know. We need to learn to play an instrument, and then on the next album we need to play only instruments we don't know how to play. I think that's a great way to work. That's an Eno-esque way to work. You know, we don't necessarily have to use the state-of-the-art equipment that everyone else uses. You know, we sometimes should really concentrate on using things that have less possibilities. I mean, Eno has one great quote here. He was quoted recently talking about this. Yeah, but what I do can work for any artist. In modern recording, one of the biggest problems is that you're in the world of endless possibilities. So I try to close down those possibilities early on. I limit choices. I confine people to a small area of maneuvering. There's a reason that the guitar players invariably produce more interesting music than synthesizer players. You can go through the options on a guitar in about a minute. After that, you have to start making only aesthetic and stylistic decisions. This is very important. This computer can contain 1,000 different soft synths, each with 1,000 sounds, but that doesn't produce music. I try to provide constraints for people, to set limitations. Now, when you work with a record like this in a studio like this, I mean, the constraints are set for you. You know, here you don't have infinite choices. But you know, when I get it home to mix, I suddenly have infinite choices, and that's not always a good thing. It's really not always a good thing, as we all know. We can get lost in our menus of plugins. We can get lost in, you know, it's easier to call up a tape delay emulation than it is to call up a tape delay. But I promise you that the randomness of the tape delay itself is going to be much cooler in the end. Because the one thing that the plugin can't do is be random. It's going to be the same emulation every single time. Sure, we can tweak we can tweak the parameters, but it's a virtual essence of something that has a living, breathing life. I mean, go play a Hammond B3 organ and play, you know, what is the emulator, B4, you know, this plugin. I mean, it sounds great in isolation. Then you go play a B3. The cool thing about the B3 is that it's fucked up. That's what's cool about it. Each one is different. There's no like single B3 that you can go sample and build an emulation of. Each one is a handmade instrument that actually, at this point, is essentially falling apart, and that's exactly what is cool about it. So, you know, when you are in it, when you have a chance to do so, put yourself in those positions to really reach beyond our menus and beyond our LCD screens, you know, and just really think about, you know, how we can limit our choices and do something interesting. We are told that if we are not comfortable, that is not good. That is certainly often, but that's actually untrue. Discomfort usually equals innovation. When things don't sound the way that we think they should, that can be an opportunity. Learn to recognize that. Until they are accepted, new ideas are always wrong. You know, that's why they're new. They didn't exist before because people thought they were wrong. Nobody who ever did something really new was completely certain that they were right. There's always self-doubt when we are sailing on new waters. Learn to recognize this as a good sign and not as a bad one. Don't be afraid to be awkward, clumsy. Perfection usually means you are doing something else somebody already did. And I think that's a really, really important point. You know, it's only perfect because it's been generally agreed that it's perfect. You know, when you're doing something cool, it means that it might actually bother somebody. It might even bother you. You know, and you know, I think, you know, sometimes the mix that you're working on is just bad. But sometimes it is gloriously wrong in a way that is fresh, new, and exciting. Listen to Radiohead. I mean, these mixes are a disaster of you know, if you think about just normal, like, balancing of things, like in a nice balance. None of them are not nicely balanced. But they're absolutely interesting and compelling records, just because of that reason. Because people are daring to just go out and mix it the way they want, and they have nobody to reference. Okay, they're rich, spoiled rock stars, so they can get away with it. But that's great. I mean, I use that as an inspiration. You know, listen to stuff, really listen to how much the records that you really love are out of balance, how they are not really about perfection per se. And I think you need to use that as an inspiration. And ultimately, in the end, the great producer knows how to recognize the difference between what is really broken and what just seems like it's broken. And it's not an easy thing to do. I'm just going to end with one quote. I appreciate your patience. I read this book recently. It reminded me of my experiences in the 80s. I spent a lot of time touring America, just in vans, sleeping on people's floors, playing for $20 at the end of the night, sneaking 7 or 8 people into one motel room just because we couldn't afford more than that. And I read a book recently written by a guy that was in an independent band called The Divine Weeks in the late 80s in America. It never really made it big. And the book is called 33 Days Touring in a Van, Sleeping on Floors, and Chasing a Dream. And I really thought these words were really apt to any creative act, especially music, because he's talking about music in particular. He goes, "We know music can't change the world, but music changed our world, and it can change theirs. It's not even like we're trying to convince anyone our music can change the world. We're just trying to show people we feel reborn doing what we're meant to do. So let your dreams take hold and watch what can happen. Take that idea and pass it along to anyone else you know that's dying out there and too scared to move their feet." Thanks.